I came home exhausted, expecting nothing more than a quiet evening to wind down from the long day. But instead, I walked into an unsettling silence, one that didn't belong in my home. My mother, my wife Dorothy, my sons, and my so-called best friend Paul were all seated on the couch. Their faces were blank, their eyes deliberately avoiding mine. Something was off. It wasn't the usual awkward tension that sometimes hung in the air when I came home late. It wasn't the faint scent of burnt food from Dorothy's less-than-successful cooking experiments. It wasn't even the way my son sat rigid, like he was bracing himself. No, this was different. Calculated. I set my briefcase down and rolled my shoulders, trying to read the room. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. The pause that followed sent a chill through me. Then Mark, my eldest, cleared his throat and said something I'll never forget. "Dad, sit down. You need to accept that things have changed. You're not the head of this family anymore. Uncle Paul, he's more like a father to us now." The words hit like a blade to the gut. I blinked, convinced I had misunderstood. "Come again?" I said, my tone calm, eerily calm despite the fire igniting in my chest. Mark avoided my gaze, his fingers tapping against his knee, an old nervous habit. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. My attention shifted to Dorothy, the one person who should have spoken up, who should have stopped this. She sat there with her hands folded neatly in her lap, with blank expression. Not surprised, not ashamed, just blank. She knew. They all knew. My mother shifted slightly, sighing like this moment had been a long time coming. She didn't seem shocked either, not outraged. She was part of it. And Paul looked entirely at ease, as if this betrayal was just another routine event. His posture was relaxed, his face calm. Too calm, like he had been sitting in my place for some time now. That's when it hit me this wasn't sudden. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been orchestrated. I scanned the faces of my sons, searching for something: remorse, doubt, even hesitation. But Mark was firm. And Evan, my younger son, though quieter, didn't avert his eyes. He didn't deny it. I took a slow, controlled breath, suppressing the fury building inside. I'd spent years mastering composure, debating ruthless opponents in court, dismantling arguments with precision. But this wasn't about the law. This was personal. "Paul is more like a father to you?" I repeated, my voice disturbingly even. Mark nodded, his jaw clenched. Yeah, I still didn't look at Paul. I wasn't ready to give him that. Instead, I turned back to Dorothy. "Dorothy," I said, my voice cold, edged with something dangerous. "Do you have anything to say?" For the first time, her mask cracked. She inhaled sharply, smoothing the fabric of her dress with trembling hands as if she could straighten away the betrayal. She wasn't ready for this moment. That was my first real victory. "I think it's best if we all—" Dorothy began, her voice rehearsed, but I raised a hand to stop her. "No, no scripted lines. No polished deflections. Just answer me one thing. Dorothy, when exactly did my role as your husband, as their father, expire? Was it a slow erosion over time, or did you make that decision in one night, lying in my bed?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. That was my second victory. She hadn't anticipated resistance. She thought I'd either explode or collapse. But I didn't. I was measured, cold, calculating, composed. Then I finally turned to Paul. Paul, the man I once trusted above all else. The man who was there when my children were born. Who raised his glass at my wedding. Who stood by me in triumph and in grief. A man I once called brother. And now here he was, sitting in my house, in my chair, in my presence, waiting for me to concede that he had won. He was expecting me to fall apart. I smiled, small, slow, and unnerving, the kind of smile that used to make opposing counsel shift in their seats. Paul's confidence wavered, just slightly, but enough. That was my third victory. I let out a breath and stepped back, casually adjusting my cuffs as though the entire scene unfolding before me was nothing more than a curiosity, an insignificant wrinkle in an otherwise ordinary evening. The air in the room felt heavier now, claustrophobic. But I wouldn't show it. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing a crack. I moved toward the door. "You have something to say?" Paul finally asked, voice smooth, composed, arrogant. I paused, tilted my head slightly. Let the silence stretch, let the discomfort thicken. Then I chuckled, a quiet, knowing sound that said everything without saying a word. That was my fourth victory. Without another glance, I walked out. Because tonight wasn't a loss. Tonight was preparation. And by the time they understood what I was building, it would be far too late. I closed the door behind me and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. Movement. A shift. A few quiet sighs of relief. They thought I was gone. That confirmed it. They had expected fury, a spectacle, maybe even a desperate demand for answers. But they didn't understand me at all. I walked down the hall past the framed family photos, images that now mocked me. Lies trapped behind glass. Frozen smiles. Manufactured moments. False loyalty. My wife. My mother. My sons. Paul. The betrayal itself wasn't what struck the deepest blow, it was the casualness of it. The normalcy. The quiet certainty with which they had moved on without me. I entered my study and shut the door with the same calm I'd held since the moment I walked in. I sat down in my chair, leaned back, and folded my hands. Then I exhaled. The rage was there, simmering, coiled like a snake in the dark, whispering for release. I could go back in there and reduce that living room to wreckage. I could drag Paul outside and show him what real pain feels like. But violence is fleeting. Pain dulls. Bruises fade. Revenge, though real revenge, is permanent. And for that, I would need patience. The pieces were falling into place. The signs had been there all along, not missed, but ignored. Because I had chosen to trust. Because my mother's influence had always been too strong. She had chosen Dorothy for me, not directly, not in so many words, but she had shaped the narrative, guided it. She made sure I saw Dorothy as the logical choice, a good wife, a proper woman, someone who would help build a respectable life. And she had been right. Dorothy was all those things until she wasn't. Until being my wife no longer satisfied her. I leaned forward, fingers tapping rhythmically against the desk. Paul. Of all the men in the world, why him? I had considered the possibility of infidelity before. It comes with the territory when you're a lawyer. You see too many marriages rot behind closed doors. Too many secrets. Too many quiet betrayals. I had always told myself that if it ever happened to me, I'd know. I'd sense it. But I hadn't, because this hadn't been a single, sharp betrayal. It had been a transition. A quiet, deliberate shift. A calculated replacement. A coup. Their mistake? They misread my silence as submission. They thought I was too old to resist. Too settled to retaliate. But the truth? I was already gone. Not physically yet, but mentally, emotionally. I had disconnected. And when a man no longer cares, when he stops trying to salvage what's left, he becomes dangerous. That was their first misstep. Their second? They believed I had nothing left to lose. They thought they had stripped me of everything. But they forgot I'm a lawyer. And power? Power isn't about feelings. It's about leverage. And I had more leverage than they could ever imagine. The plan came together quickly. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. First, call my financial advisor. James, I said, voice calm, precise. Effective immediately, freeze every joint account. A pause. Sir, are you sure? That would include your wife's access. I know exactly what it includes. Understood. Click. First move made. Next, I called my attorney. Stan, I said, even smoother now. I need a rush filing. Divorce papers. Irrevocable. No negotiations. A pause. Then a weary sigh. Daniel, now? Yes. Now. Another pause. I'll have the paperwork ready by morning. Second move made. Then came the third call to someone from a different part of my life. Someone who owed me a favor. Someone who specialized in dismantling reputations. The wheels began turning. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling, already feeling the weight shift. They thought I had slinked away in defeat, that I was licking wounds. But I wasn't retreating. I was preparing. And by the time they understood what I was doing, it would be far too late. The next morning, the storm arrived not with rage or noise, but in absolute, devastating quiet. It began when Dorothy sat down to make one of her usual transfers, maybe for a house expense, or another overpriced boutique item she deemed a necessary luxury. But this time, the screen blinked red. Transaction declined. She frowned, refreshed the page. Declined. Tried again from her phone. Switched accounts. Declined. Dorothy wasn't a fool. She knew. She threw on her coat, grabbed the keys to the Mercedes I had gifted her, and drove straight to the bank. And that's where reality finally hit her. The accounts are frozen, Mrs. Lennox, the bank manager said, shifting nervously behind the desk. Dorothy snapped, already on edge. What's the issue? My account shows a security hold, I need it lifted. The manager hesitated, clearly dreading the role he'd been cast in. I'm afraid that won't be possible, ma'am. Her eyes narrowed. And why not? He drew a breath, his discomfort visible. Your husband issued a freeze on all joint accounts. His attorney provided the necessary documentation. Legally, we cannot grant access without his authorization. Dorothy's breath caught. That's absurd. I've had access to those accounts for years. Yes, ma'am, he replied calmly. And now, you don't. A creeping dread settled into her expression. The realization finally took root, I had cut her off entirely. She had never believed I would go that far. Not after all our years together. Not after building a life. She expected me to fall apart. Instead, I starved them. First came the credit cards. By the time she left the bank, her hands were trembling as she called Paul. I could imagine the panic in her voice. Paul, he froze everything. What do we do? But Paul had his own fires to put out. While she was storming the bank lobby, I had already moved on to phase 2. Every line of credit, she had access to every card. Every account was systematically being shut down. On her way home, she stopped at a cafe, no doubt hoping to salvage a sliver of normalcy. Card declined. She tried another. Declined. Even the emergency card buried in her purse. Declined. That's when the fear truly set in. And while Dorothy spiraled, Paul was entering his own freefall. His business, the one he proudly touted as a personal success, was, in truth, built on my back. Not because of his brilliance or acumen, but because I had opened doors for him. I had connected him with clients, introduced him to key investors, and positioned him in the right circles. Now I was pulling every string I'd once tied. His collapse started quietly. One of his oldest investors, a construction firm that had routed steady work to him for years, suddenly canceled all contracts. Then came a cold, formal email from his primary supplier. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we regret to inform you that our partnership is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Paul didn't realize it yet, but his business was on life support. By noon, 2 more investors had withdrawn. By dinner, the company's cash flow was suffocating. And when he finally checked his own financial accounts, they were bleeding out. I hadn't just removed him from my life. I had amputated his survival. As Dorothy and Paul unraveled in their separate corners of the fallout, my sons Mark and Evan were next in line for their reckoning. They had never truly valued the life I provided. The private schools, the Ivy League degrees, the sleek European cars in the driveway. Every comfort they enjoyed was a product of my effort, my sacrifices. And yet they had disowned me in favor of Paul. They had replaced me before I even walked out that door. So I gave them exactly what they claimed to want: life without me. First to go? Tuition payments. Mark, who was deep into his master's program, received the first wake-up call. Your tuition balance is past due. If not resolved within 7 days, your enrollment will be suspended. Evan, who had grown comfortable in his carefree lifestyle, suddenly found his monthly allowance gone. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. He called the bank, and just like their mother, he was met with the same cold response. Your father has revoked all access to these funds. You no longer have authorization. Panic set in. By evening, the phone call started. Dorothy called. My sons called. Paul called. Even my mother, the same woman who raised me, who had orchestrated much of this betrayal, picked up the phone and dialed. I ignored them all. Not yet. Not until they felt the full weight of their choices. Not until they tasted the absence. Not until it was undeniable that the man they had pushed aside, the man they had so easily replaced, was the very foundation their lives had been built upon. By nightfall, I imagined they were all gathered in that same living room. The same room where they made their choice. But this time, the atmosphere had shifted. The power had changed hands. They weren't in control anymore. They were flailing, gasping for breath. And I was watching them drown. Paul, still clinging to his illusion of stability, sat in his office, sipping his overpriced coffee, utterly unaware of the storm tearing through his world. His business had never been a monument to brilliance or hard work. It was a scaffolding of favors, introductions, and borrowed prestige. All of it mine. From day one, Paul leaned on my connections, my clients, my investors, my reputation, and I gave freely because once he had been my closest friend, a brother in everything but name. Now, I was going to dismantle him. The first strike, disappearing investors. The first signal, an email with a subject line that hit like a hammer: contract termination. Paul skimmed the message, his forehead tightening. Due to unforeseen financial considerations, we regret to inform you that our contract with your firm is terminated, effective immediately. His jaw clenched. The sender? One of his largest clients. A source of steady cash flow. He set his phone down, running a hand through his hair, trying to shake the rising unease. Surely this was a mistake, something that could be resolved with a quick call. He dialed, forcing a grin as the line connected. Hey, Chris, just saw the email. What's going on? A pause. Long and heavy. Then Chris sighed. Paul, I'm sorry, man. Really. But we can't be associated with you anymore. Paul's grip on the phone tightened. What? Why? What's changed since last week? Another silence. Then the words that made Paul's stomach sink. Daniel. Everything's gone cold. Paul swallowed. What about him? Chris hesitated again, his voice dropping. Look, Paul, I don't know what happened between you two, but let's just say, he's making it clear that staying in business with you is not a smart move. Paul shot out of his chair, sending his coffee crashing across his desk. This is insane. Daniel wouldn't do that. He's not like. Chris cut him off. He's a powerful man, Paul. Respected. And between you and me, if I had to pick between doing business with him or with you, a beat, I'd choose him. Every time. Click. The line went dead. Paul stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear long after the call had ended. No, this couldn't be real. Daniel was a lot of things: methodical, calculating, even ruthless in a courtroom, but he wasn't the kind of man who would destroy someone's life. Was he? His phone rang again. Another investor. Same message. Then another. And another. By noon, 4 of Paul's major clients had withdrawn. By 3 p.m., his suppliers had stopped answering his calls. By 5 p.m., his entire company was gasping for breath, barely functioning, teetering on collapse. Then came the death blow. The business license was revoked. Paul was still in shock when his secretary stepped into the office, her face drained of color. "Sir," she said cautiously, we just received something from the licensing board." He looked up, his stomach tightening. "What is it?" She hesitated, then placed the envelope gently on his desk. Paul picked it up with trembling fingers, unfolded the document, and read the opening line. Effective immediately, the following business licenses have been revoked due to ongoing legal investigations involving potential ethical violations and conflicts of interest. The rest of the words blurred. It was over. His business done. Officially. Legally. Irrevocably. The reality hit like a hammer. He sank back in his chair, breath shallow, mind racing. This wasn't just misfortune. This was deliberate. A calculated, devastating strike. And only one person could have orchestrated something this precise. Daniel. His former best friend. His brother in everything but blood. The man he had betrayed. Now, Paul was finally understanding Daniel didn't just strike back. He annihilated. He erased. The desperate call came moments later. Once Paul had gathered enough sense to check his phone, he saw the damage. 69 missed calls. Half from Dorothy. The rest a flood of investors, employees, and clients, all confused, all panicked, all demanding answers. And through it all, Daniel had remained silent. Paul clenched his jaw and hit redial. Voicemail again. The same message that had greeted him every time that day. "You've reached Daniel Lennox. I'm unavailable. Leave a message." Beep. He took a shaky breath. "Daniel," he began, voice tight. "I don't know what this is, but you need to stop. Please. Let's just talk. Call me back, okay? This has gone far enough." Click. Call ended. Message ignored. Paul stared down at the phone in his hand, heart pounding. For the first time in his life, he was truly afraid. Daniel wasn't just angry. He wasn't just getting even. He was wiping Paul off the map. And there was absolutely nothing Paul could do to stop it. That evening, the house was unbearably still. Dorothy sat in the living room, white-knuckled hands wrapped around her phone. The nearby lamp flickered weakly, casting a dim light on her anxious expression. She had called Daniel repeatedly. Still no answer. Not even a single word in return. With trembling fingers, she tried Paul next. But even before the first ring, she knew what she'd hear. "The number you are trying to reach is unavailable." She exhaled shakily and glanced across the room. Mark sat on the couch, unmoving, eyes locked on his laptop screen. But he wasn't typing. He wasn't doing anything at all. His screen was frozen on one notification plain, cold and damning. Evan, unable to stay still, paced furiously. He never handled uncertainty well, and right now everything was slipping beyond his grasp. They all knew. Dorothy knew. Her sons knew. But no one dared speak it aloud. Because saying it would mean acknowledging the truth. Admitting that Daniel had done what none of them thought possible. He had dismantled their world, piece by piece. Mark hadn't spoken in over an hour. Not since he checked his student portal and saw the alert. His tuition payment hadn't gone through. Not since he saw the glaring red notice at the top of the screen. Urgent, tuition payment past due. Immediate payment required to remain enrolled. Mark's stomach dropped. That had to be a mistake. His tuition was always handled well in advance. He'd never even needed to think about it. But when he checked the financial records, a cold dread crept in. The money was gone. His father had cut off everything. Mark had always believed his education was a given, just another part of the secure life his father had provided. Something permanent, unshakable, just like the man himself. Now, he wasn't so sure about either. His thoughts drifted back to what they had said the night before. "Uncle Paul is more like a father to us now." And just like that, his stomach twisted. He had made the wrong choice. Evan's collapse came fast. He broke the silence first. "Mom," he barked, dragging a hand through his hair, "I just tried to get gas and my card got declined." Again, Dorothy didn't respond. She sat frozen, staring at her phone, mind clearly elsewhere. Evan scoffed, his frustration mounting as he paced the room. "I called the bank. Guess what? My account's been drained." He spun, glaring at both his mother and brother. "Is anyone going to say it? Dad's cutting us off." Mark clenched his jaw, but stayed silent. Dorothy finally drew a slow, shaky breath. "Yes," she admitted softly. "He is." Evan laughed bitterly, throwing up his hands. "Well, fantastic. What did you think was going to happen? You let Uncle Paul walk all over him, and now we're all paying for it." Dorothy's head snapped toward him. "I didn't let Paul do anything," she hissed. "Your father." She stopped herself, exhaled sharply. Your father is retaliating. That's all. Evan shook his head in disbelief. Retaliating? Mom, wake up. He's burning everything down. And for the first time that day, Dorothy believed it. Then came the call that changed everything. The house phone rang. The room went still. Dorothy lunged for it so quickly she nearly dropped it. Daniel? She breathed. But it wasn't him. It was her mother. And her voice was sharp. Icy. Dorothy, Marlene said coolly, are you sitting down? Dorothy frowned, clutching the phone tighter. What is it? Marlene sighed, bracing herself. Then she said the words that made Dorothy's vision go white. Your father's retirement fund is gone. Dorothy's mouth went dry. What? She whispered. Marlene didn't waver. I checked the accounts this morning, the ones Daniel managed for us. They're empty. Every last cent. Dorothy's breath caught. That's not possible. Daniel wouldn't. Wouldn't he? Marlene's tone sharpened like a blade. Because I think he would. And I think he just did. The room tilted. Her thoughts spiraled. Her father. Her mother. They had trusted Daniel for years. Trusted him with their finances, their future. His management, his decisions, his name had built their security. And now it was all gone. Her parents were paying for her betrayal. Dorothy squeezed her eyes shut. Shame and panic roared inside her. For the first time since this unraveling began, she felt something she never expected. Regret. She barely remembered hanging up. Her mother's final words still echoed in her mind. We're broke. Her son's accusations rang just as loud. What did you think was going to happen? But above all, what haunted her the most was the silence from Daniel. She had expected rage, yelling, confrontation. But there was none of that. He hadn't said a word. Instead, he had simply walked away. And in doing so, he had dismantled everything. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't lashed out. He had just vanished. He let them choose. Then he showed them the price of that choice. And now, as Dorothy sat gripping her phone like a lifeline, the truth hit her with full force. Daniel wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to rescue them. He wasn't going to fix this. For the first time in her life, Dorothy realized something chilling. She had never really known her husband. She had known the version of Daniel who gave without question. The version who loved her unconditionally. The version who never pushed back. But the real Daniel? The real Daniel was the man now watching them all unravel and doing absolutely nothing to stop it. The house of cards collapsed completely that night. Lying awake in bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, Dorothy replayed it all. How fast it had fallen apart. How one single day had turned her entire world upside down. Yesterday, she'd thought her life was stable. Today, there was nothing left. And worst of all, she had no one to blame but herself. Dorothy had known fear before. She'd been terrified as a broke college student, barely scraping by. She'd been overwhelmed as a young mother, crying alongside her newborn twins. She'd even feared the quiet ache of falling out of love with her husband. But this was different. This wasn't just about her. This was devastation. She had lost everything. And for the first time, she had no idea how to put it back together. The house was a mess. Her sons were spiraling. Her mother wouldn't stop calling. Paul had gone completely silent. And the one man who could set it all right, the one she had betrayed, wouldn't answer the phone. She tried again. The call rang. And rang. And rang. Straight to voicemail. You've reached Daniel Lennox. I'm unavailable. Leave a message. Dorothy clenched her jaw, swallowing the lump in her throat. He was ignoring her. She tried a text. Nothing. An email. Nothing. Then, in desperation, she reached for the house phone. Surely he wouldn't ignore a call from home, from the place they had built together. But he did. And that was when she finally understood. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a warning. Daniel wasn't coming back. The sons Mark and Evan were unraveling just as quickly. They had never feared financial instability before. Money had always been there. Until now. Until the man they had dismissed, replaced, mocked, took it all away. And they weren't handling it well. I don't understand, Mark muttered, pacing the room. He can't just cut us off like this, can he? Evan scoffed. Yeah, genius he just did. Mark raked a hand through his hair. Okay, but Mommy's not just gonna let us go homeless, right? He won't just abandon us. Dorothy wanted to say no. She wanted to reassure them. She wanted to believe it herself. But the words wouldn't come. Because she wasn't sure anymore. Evan snatched his phone. Screw this. I'm calling him. Voicemail. Mark tried next. Voicemail. Then came the desperation, their voices cracking with panic. Dad, come on. We were upset. We didn't mean it. You're still our father, okay? Just call us back. Please, Dad. We're sorry. We need you. But Daniel never answered. And the silence? It hurt more than anything he could have ever said. Dorothy's final attempt came quietly, but desperately. She knew what she had to do. She had to see him face to face. Make him hear her. Make him forgive her. So she grabbed her keys, climbed into the car Daniel had bought her, and drove straight to his office. But when she arrived, the receptionist didn't even blink. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lennox, the woman said, her tone polite but distant. Mr. Lennox has given strict instructions not to see you. Dorothy's stomach twisted. Not to see her? Her own husband? She forced a shaky smile. You must be mistaken. We're married. He'll see me. The receptionist hesitated, then silently handed her an envelope, her expression laced with quiet sympathy. Dorothy stepped aside, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a single document. A divorce petition. Filed. Signed. Complete. A small note was clipped to it. Just 5 words. There's nothing left to fix. Dorothy couldn't breathe. She had lost. And Daniel? Daniel had already let go. That night, the second blow landed, this time at home. When Dorothy walked through the door, her mother was waiting. Marlene sat in the living room, hands folded, her eyes hard as stone. She already knew. I warned you, Marlene said quietly, her voice cool and sharp. I told you to be careful. Dorothy let out a bitter laugh. Careful? Careful of what, Mother? Marlene exhaled, shaking her head. Of underestimating a man like Daniel. Dorothy clenched her fists. You told me. I told you, Marlene cut in, voice like steel. That men adjust. That your father adjusted. But Daniel? Daniel was not your father. She gave Dorothy a long, piercing look. I told you what it would take to keep a man like him. Instead, you let your pride burn everything down. Dorothy's voice cracked. I just wanted my freedom. Marlene nodded once. And now you have it. Tell me, how does it feel? Dorothy had no answer. Because the truth? It felt like hell. By midnight, Paul broke. Everything was gone, his business, his wealth, his reputation. And worst of all, Daniel. Only now did he truly understand. Daniel had trusted him. Daniel had built him. And Paul had betrayed him. But Paul wasn't going to take it lying down. He still had one move left. He drove straight to Daniel's house, marched up the steps, and banged furiously on the front door. Daniel, he yelled, come out and face me. For a moment, silence. Then the door opened. And there was Daniel. Calm, unshaken, cold. Paul's rage stumbled. Because the man standing before him wasn't angry. He wasn't out for revenge. He had already won. And Paul was already destroyed. Daniel tilted his head slightly. What exactly do you want, Paul? He asked, voice low and even. Paul swallowed hard. You ruined me. Daniel nodded, almost matter of fact. Yes. Paul's fist clenched. You had no right. Daniel stepped forward, quiet and dangerous. No, Paul. I had every right. And in that moment, Paul felt it real, sharp fear. Because Daniel hadn't just retaliated. He had ensured Paul would never recover. And still, Dorothy wasn't done. One last call. One last plea. Her voice shook as she left the message. Daniel, please. We were wrong. I was wrong. Just talk to me. Please. One more chance. But there was no reply. And this time, there never would be. Because Daniel was already gone. And he wasn't looking back. I watched the phone vibrate on the table. Dorothy, again. I didn't answer, not because I hadn't heard it, and not because I was busy, but because she no longer deserved a response. I let it ring until it stopped. Then, a minute later, another call, Mark. Then Evan. Then Dorothy's mother. One after another. I let them all go to voicemail. For the first time in 19 years, I didn't owe them a single thing. No time, no patience, no presence, and certainly not my forgiveness. I knew it wouldn't end there. I knew Dorothy well enough to expect the next move. So, when she showed up at my office the next morning, I wasn't surprised. She stormed past the receptionist before anyone could stop her, slamming the door behind her. I leaned back in my chair, watching her, her eyes red, her hands shaking. She was desperate now. Good. She deserved to be. Daniel, she started, her voice raw. Please. I just watched her, letting the silence speak for me. She took a deep breath, swallowing hard. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. I tilted my head slightly. Which part, Dorothy? The lying? The betrayal? The planning? The fact that you never intended to stop until I caught you? She flinched. That was the truth, wasn't it? She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry I found out. She took another step forward. Daniel, please, she whispered. I love you. I exhaled slowly and quietly. Then, I stood, walked around my desk, and stopped right in front of her. I said the words that would finally end this. No, you don't, Dorothy. Her breath caught. Her lips trembled. I didn't stop. You never did, not in the way that mattered. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. That's not true. I cut her off. You love what I did for you. You love what I provided. You love the security, the lifestyle, the illusion. But me, the man, the husband? You haven't loved me for years, Dorothy. Maybe you never did. She shook her head quickly, stepping closer. That's not true. I made a mistake. I smiled, a small, cold, knowing smile, the kind that made her stop in her tracks. You didn't make a mistake, Dorothy, I said softly. You made a choice. And now you have to live with it. Later that evening, the sons who had chosen the wrong side confronted me. When I got home, Mark and Evan were standing in the living room, arms crossed, their faces grim. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. Silence filled the space. Finally, Mark spoke. "Dad, come on," he said, his voice tight. "Isn't this a little extreme?" I didn't answer. He sighed. "I mean, okay, we get it. Mom screwed up, but don't you think ruining us is a little much?" I raised an eyebrow. "Ruining you?" I repeated, my voice flat. Evan scoffed and shook his head. "Dad, we have nothing left, no money, no security, no future." I let those words hang between us for a moment. Then I pushed off the door, walked up to them, and said the words that finally made them understand. "Welcome to the life you thought I didn't matter in." Mark's mouth snapped shut. Evan swallowed hard. I tilted my head. "You thought I was just there, just existing, that my presence was optional. I was just a provider, a bank account, and when they thought they had a replacement, they dismissed me like I was nothing." I let out a quiet chuckle. They didn't speak because they knew I was right. Now they wanted me to fix it. They wanted my money, my security, my presence, but they had already made their choice, and so had I. Paul's final attempt came, and I should have expected it. That last, desperate move. That night, as I packed the last of my things, Paul showed up, banging on my door. I opened it, unsurprised. He stood there like a man who had lost everything because he had. "Daniel," he started, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. I just looked at him. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his hand over his face. "I screwed up," he muttered. "I know that. But you destroyed me, man. You ruined my business, my reputation, my entire damn life." I let him talk, let him spill his excuses, his regrets, his pathetic attempts to shift the blame. Then, finally, I spoke. "Good." Paul blinked. "What?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Good. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. To be betrayed by someone you trusted. To have the people you cared about turn their backs on you." He swallowed hard. "Daniel, I didn't mean." I cut him off. "You did. And that's why I don't care." His face paled. For the first time, he understood there was nothing to fix. There was no forgiveness, no second chance. I let the silence stretch between us. Then finally, I shut the door and locked it. Because Paul was already dead to me. The goodbye that wasn't really a goodbye came the next morning. I packed my bags. I had everything I needed, my wealth, my power, my freedom. I walked through the house one last time, letting my fingers trail over the furniture, the walls, the pieces of a life that had never truly been mine. Then, without looking back, I walked out the door, leaving them all behind for good. And the best part? I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel regret. I felt free finally, completely free. I stepped into the hotel lobby, feeling lighter than I had in years. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Welcome, Mr. Lennox. Your suite is ready." "Thank you," I said, handing over my card, the one Dorothy couldn't touch. As she processed my check-in, I glanced at my phone's 67 missed calls. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. They were still begging, still scrambling to reach me, still trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But it was too late. Because for the first time in 19 years, I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore. I was done, and they were exactly where they deserved to be. The fallout began the next morning. The desperation had reached its peak. I ignored their calls all night, but the messages kept coming. "Dorothy, Daniel, please. I'm begging you. Just talk to me. Mark, Dad, come on, let's just meet and figure this out. Evan, we screwed up. We know that, but we're still your family. Marlene, Daniel, enough of this. You've made your point." That last one almost made me laugh. Made my point. No, I wasn't done making my point. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee as I watched everything unravel from a distance. Dorothy had to face reality. Dorothy must have finally realized how deep she was in when she went to the bank again. This time, she wasn't just trying to access her frozen accounts, she was trying to save herself. She wanted a loan, a last-ditch effort to maintain the illusion that everything wasn't falling apart. But she should have known better. When the loan officer looked at her records, all he saw was a woman with no financial stability, no job, no steady income, nothing of her own. She had been comfortable for too long, relying on my money, my name, my influence. Now, she had none of it. When the bank denied her loan request, she left with a stunned, broken expression because, for the first time in her life, she truly had nothing. Mark and Evan learned the hard way. Mark tried to keep up his usual confidence. He called his college, demanding an extension on his tuition. He argued, negotiated, tried to leverage my name. But my name no longer belonged to him. The financial aid office wasn't interested in his excuses. They gave him a 7-day deadline. If he didn't come up with the payment, he was out. Evan, meanwhile, had his own wake-up call when he went to get his car serviced, only to find out the payments hadn't gone through. That's when it finally hit him. He didn't own his car. I did. And now, the repo company was on its way to take it back. I could only imagine the look on his face when he realized he wasn't as independent as he thought. He had spent years thinking I was just a wallet. Now, he knew what it was like to live without it. Paul's collapse deepened. He was drowning. He had spent years riding on my connections, my influence, my generosity. He had stolen my wife, my family, my place, and now he had nothing. The moment I cut him off, his investors scattered. His business was already a corpse. But the real kicker came when the lawsuits started rolling in. All those clients he had screwed over, the ones he had overcharged, misled, and taken advantage of because I had vouched for him, they were coming for him now. Without my protection, he was finished. I imagined him sitting at his desk, staring at the pile of legal notices, realizing that the man he thought he had replaced had completely destroyed him. Good. Let him rot. By the third day, the calls slowed. The messages shifted from anger to pleading. They weren't demanding anymore. They weren't telling me to be reasonable. They were begging. And that's when I knew I had won. I had broken them. I sat in my hotel suite, scrolling through the messages, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Because I was free. For the first time since I married Dorothy, for the first time since I had been manipulated into being the perfect husband and the perfect provider, I wasn't someone's safety net. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I wasn't someone's wallet. I was just me. And I liked that. The final call came on a Friday evening. I didn't expect to answer it, but something made me pick up, not out of sympathy, not out of regret, just curiosity. I pressed the phone to my ear. Silence. Then Dorothy's voice, small and broken. "Daniel," she whispered. I didn't respond. She exhaled shakily. I don't even know what to say." I took a sip of my drink, then replied, "Don't say anything." A pause. I need to understand. How do we end up here?" I almost laughed, as if she didn't already know. But I answered anyway. "We ended up here the moment you thought I was replaceable." She let out a quiet sob. "Can't we fix this?" she whispered. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Dorothy," I said calmly, "we can't." Another silence. Then her final plea. "Daniel, I still love you." I smiled, a slow, knowing, victorious smile. And finally, I gave her my answer. "That's nice," I said, "but I don't love you." With that, I hung up. The last laugh was mine. I leaned back in my chair, stretching. Outside my window, the city lights gleamed endless and full of possibilities. I was free, and they were drowning. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Not anymore. Because I had made my choice. I had walked away. And for the first time in 19 years, I was truly, completely, unapologetically free. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.